In the bustling city of Lagos, where wealth and poverty lived side by side like hostile neighbors, there lived a young woman named Chioma. At 21 years old, she had already tasted more sorrow than many experience in a lifetime. Chioma's childhood had been painted in the warm colors of love and laughter. Her father, Chief Emeka Okonkwo, had been a successful textile merchant with a kind heart and generous spirit. Her mother, Ngozi, had been a beauty whose smile could light up the darkest room. Together, they had built a comfortable life in their modest but lovely home in Surulere. Chioma remembered her 7th birthday, her mother in a vibrant purple Ankara dress with gold embroidery, dancing to high-life music while her father clapped and laughed. The compound had been filled with children, the air sweet with the smell of jollof rice and chin-chin. Her mother had braided her hair with colorful beads that clicked when she moved, and her father had called her my princess, my future lawyer. But death is a thief that respects no joy. When Chioma was 10, her mother fell ill. What started as a persistent cough became something the doctors couldn't cure. Within 6 months, Ngozi was gone, buried beneath the red earth while Chioma wept until her voice disappeared. Chief Emeka tried to be both parents. He braided Chioma's hair with clumsy fingers, burned her breakfast trying to cook, and held her when nightmares came. But the neighbors whispered, "A man cannot raise a daughter alone. A child needs a mother's touch." 2 years later, Chief Emeka remarried. Her name was Adiz, and when she first arrived at their home, she seemed like an answer to prayer. She wore beautiful wrappers in emerald green and royal blue, her neck adorned with gold necklaces that caught the sunlight. She spoke sweetly to Chioma, calling her my daughter and promising to care for her like her own child. For a while, peace returned to their home. Adiz cooked elaborate meals, kept the house spotless, and even helped Chief Emeka expand his textile business. She had a daughter from her previous marriage, a girl named Nkechi, 2 years younger than Chioma, spoiled and lazy, but seemingly harmless. Chioma, desperate for a mother's love, tried to please Adiz. She helped with chores without being asked, respected her stepmother's rules, and even defended her when relatives whispered doubts. But then, when Chioma was 18, tragedy struck again. Chief Emeka collapsed at his shop one humid afternoon. By the time they rushed him to the hospital, it was too late. A massive heart attack had stolen him from the world, leaving Chioma orphaned and vulnerable. The funeral was elaborate. Chief Emeka had been well respected in the community. Mourners filled their compound, wearing black and white, wailing and praising the dead. Chioma sat in a fog of grief, barely aware of the condolence visits, the prayers, the promises of support. She didn't notice the change in Adiz's eyes. The warmth had frozen over, replaced by something cold and calculating. 3 weeks after the burial, when the last sympathizer had gone and the house fell quiet, Adiz's mask finally slipped. Chioma had just received her university admission letter. University of Lagos, studying law, just as her father had dreamed. She had clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "Papa, I did it," she whispered to the photograph on the wall. "I'm going to be a lawyer, just like you wanted." She had run to show Adiz, expecting, hoping, for even a small smile of approval. Instead, Adiz snatched the letter from her hands and tore it in half. "You think you're going to university?" Adiz's voice was ice. "With whose money? Your father left debts. This house, this business, it all goes to paying what he owed. You have nothing." Chioma's world tilted. But Papa's business was successful. He had savings, which are now mine," Adiz snapped. "I'm his legal widow. Everything belongs to me and my daughter. You," she laughed, a cruel sound. "You are just the child for his first marriage. You have no claim here. But I'm his daughter," Chioma cried. "Then prove your worth," Adiz replied coldly. "From tomorrow, you will work. You will sell fabrics in the market. You will contribute to this household. And forget about university. That dream died with your father." That night, Chioma wept until her pillow was soaked. She clutched the torn admission letter, trying to piece it back together like she was trying to piece together her shattered life. The next morning began her nightmare. Chioma's new life, was one of relentless labor and systematic humiliation. Each dawn, before the sun painted the sky orange, Adiz would bang on her door. "Wake up, you lazy girl. The market won't wait for your tears." Chioma would rise from her thin mat on the floor. Adiz had moved her from her comfortable room to a small storage space that smelled of dust and old fabric. She would wash her face with cold water from a bucket, dress in her oldest clothes, and prepare for the day ahead. By 6 in the morning, she would be at the fabric market in Balagan, carrying a large basin on her head filled with Ankara prints, lace materials, and wrappers. Her father's once thriving shop had been closed for renovation, according to Adiz, but in reality, her stepmother had sold off the best inventory and pocketed the money. "Fine fabrics. Quality Ankara. Beautiful lace," Chioma would call out, her voice competing with dozens of other hawkers. The work was backbreaking. The basin was heavy, cutting into her scalp despite the cloth padding. The Lego sun beat down mercilessly. Her feet, once protected by comfortable shoes, now wore cheap slippers that gave her blisters. Dust coated her throat. Sweat soaked through her faded dress. And the humiliation was constant. At Chioma, one of her former classmates spotted her one day, a girl named Blessing who now attended the University of Lagos, the same school Chioma should have been attending. Blessing wore a trendy outfit, carried expensive textbooks, and looked at Chioma with a mixture of pity and superiority. "Is this you? Selling in the market?" Blessing's voice carried, attracting attention. "I thought your father wanted you to be a lawyer." Chioma's face burned with shame. "Things changed." "Clearly," Blessing said, examining her nails. "Well, some of us are going to lectures now. Life moves on, I suppose." When Chioma returned home each evening, exhausted and humiliated, there was no rest. Adiz would count every naira she'd made, accusing her of stealing if the amount was too low, of laziness if she hadn't sold enough. "You call this money?" Adiz would shout. "Nkechi spends more than this on her hair. You're useless, just like your mother was." The insult to her dead mother cut deeper than any other cruelty. Meanwhile, Nkechi, Adiz's biological daughter, lived like a princess. She wore new clothes every week, all paid for by the money from Chief Emeka's business. She attended parties, went to expensive salons, and never lifted a finger to help around the house. "Why should I work?" Nkechi would laugh when Chioma suggested she help with chores. "My mother owns this house now. You're just a maid." At night, alone in her storage room, Chioma would pull out the photograph of her parents, the one from her 7th birthday, her mother in purple, her father laughing. She would trace their faces with her finger and whisper, "Papa, Mama, where are you? Why did you leave me here?" 6 months passed in this misery. Chioma grew thinner, her once bright eyes dimming with despair. Her dreams of law school faded like old photographs left in the sun. Then, one evening, everything changed. Adiz called Chioma into the sitting room, where she sat with a woman Chioma didn't recognize, a heavy-set lady in an orange wrapper who smelled of cheap perfume. "Sit down," Adiz commanded. Chioma sat, confused and wary. "This is Mama Ngozi," Adiz said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She is a matchmaker. I have found you a husband." Chioma's blood ran cold. "What? You are 21 years old," Adiz continued, as if discussing the weather. "Old enough to marry. I have found a suitable match for you." "But I don't want to marry," Chioma protested. "I want to go to school. I want." "What you want is irrelevant," Adiz snapped. "You are a burden in this house. I have fed you, clothed you, given you shelter. It's time you left." Mama Ngozi leaned forward, her breath reeking of onions. "The man is called Obi. He lives near the junction. He had an accident some years ago. He cannot walk properly. He uses crutches." Chioma's eyes widened. "You want me to marry a disabled man?" "Disabled, crippled, whatever," Adiz waved her hand dismissively. "He needs a wife to care for him. You need a husband to take you off my hands." "It's perfect. I won't do it," Chioma said, her voice shaking but firm. "You can't force me to marry someone I don't know, someone I don't love." Adiz's face hardened. She stood up, towering over Chioma. "You ungrateful girl. After everything I've done for you, Fine. If you refuse, then leave this house tonight. Take nothing. Go and sleep on the streets. Let's see how far your pride takes you." Chioma looked around desperately, but there was no help coming. No relatives to call, no friends with resources to take her in. She was alone in the world, trapped by a cruel woman who held all the power. "You have until tomorrow to decide," Adiz said coldly. "Marriage or the streets. Choose wisely." That night, Chioma didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling of her storage room, tears sliding silently down her temples into her hair. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "My princess, my future lawyer." But that future was dead, and tomorrow she would have to choose between two forms of imprisonment. The next morning, against every instinct screaming inside her, Chioma agreed to the marriage. What choice did she have? The streets of Lagos were dangerous for a young woman alone. She had no money, no education certificate to get a job, no relatives who could take her in. Adiz had systematically isolated her, sold off her father's connections, and left her with nothing. "Smart girl," Adiz said with a satisfied smile. "The wedding will be next week. Simple ceremony, nothing elaborate. After all, it's not like you're marrying a prince." The following days were a blur of preparation, though preparation was a generous word. There was no joy, no excitement, no hope. Just grim resignation. Adiz bought Chioma a simple white dress from the market. Not even new, but secondhand, smelling faintly of mothballs. No cake was ordered, no elaborate decorations planned. This wasn't a celebration, it was a disposal. On the morning Chioma was supposed to meet her future husband, Mama Ngozi came to take her to see the groom. They walked through the bustling streets of Surulere, past the market where Chioma had hawked fabrics, past the junction where commercial buses stopped to pick up passengers. Finally, they reached a shaded area under a large tree where several beggars sat on mats, asking for alms from passers-by. "There," Mama Ngozi pointed. "That is Obi." Chioma's heart sank. Obi sat on a tattered mat, leaning against the tree trunk. His legs were stretched out before him, and she could see the crude wooden crutches beside him. He wore faded clothes, a shirt that had once been white but was now gray with age and dirt, trousers with patches at the knees. His hair was uncombed, forming small locks. His face was turned away, but she could see strong shoulders, a proud bearing despite his circumstances. Around him were a few naira notes thrown by charitable passers-by, and a battered tin cup. "This is who you want me to marry," Chioma whispered, horror and pity warring in her chest. "A beggar. He may not have much," Mama Ngozi said defensively, "but he needs a wife. And you need a husband. It's a fair match." "Fair!" Chioma wanted to scream. Instead, tears slid down her cheeks. Mama Ngozi approached the man. "Obi, this is Chioma, the girl I told you about. She will be your wife." The man turned, and Chioma found herself looking into a pair of eyes that seemed to see straight through her. They were remarkable eyes, intelligent, deep, filled with a quiet intensity that didn't match his beggar's appearance. Obi studied her for a long moment. His gaze traveled over her tear-stained face, her thin frame in its worn dress, her defeated posture. When he spoke, his voice was surprisingly cultured, with none of the rough edges she'd expected. "Why are you crying?" he asked gently. The question, asked with such simple kindness, broke something inside Chioma. "Because," she whispered, "my life is over before it even began." Obi was silent for a moment. Then he said, "A life is never over while breath remains. Sometimes the worst moments are just before the best ones arrive." Despite everything, despite the horror of her situation, Chioma felt something stir at those words. A tiny spark of something that might have been hope. "Will you marry me?" Obi asked, his tone formal, respectful. Chioma looked at him, really looked at him. Beneath the dirt and the worn clothes, she saw a man with dignity. A man who, despite sitting at a junction begging for coins, still had pride in his eyes. "Do I have a choice?" she asked softly. "There's always a choice," Obi replied. "But sometimes all the choices are difficult ones." Chioma nodded slowly. "Then yes, I will marry you." Obi's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those deep eyes. "Then I promise you this, Chioma. Whatever happens, I will never raise my hand to you. I will never diminish you. And I will always see you as you truly are, not as the world has tried to make you." The words were so unexpected, so solemn, that Chioma felt fresh tears spring to her eyes. When was the last time anyone had spoken to her with such respect? "Thank you," she whispered. The wedding day arrived like a funeral. The ceremony was held at a small registry office. Not even a church, just a government building with peeling paint and fluorescent lights that buzzed. Adiz had insisted on the registry to save money, though Chioma suspected the real reason was to avoid the scrutiny of their church community, who might have questioned the haste and circumstances of the marriage. Chioma wore the second-hand white dress, which fit poorly and smelled of another woman's perfume. She had no makeup, no jewelry except for her mother's small gold earrings, the only precious thing Adiz hadn't managed to take from her. Her hair was plaited in simple cornrows, done by her own hands the night before. When she looked in the cracked mirror of her storage room that morning, she didn't recognize herself. The bright-eyed girl who had once dreamed of law school had been replaced by a hollow-eyed young woman who looked defeated before life had even truly begun. "Stop crying and fix your face," Adiz snapped. "You should be grateful anyone wants to marry you at all." Nkechi laughed from the doorway. "Look at the beggar's bride. Maybe your husband will teach you how to beg properly. You can sit at the junction together." Chioma said nothing. What was there to say? They arrived at the registry in a decrepit taxi. Adiz refused to spend money on a proper car. Obi was already there, sitting in his wheelchair now instead of on his mat. Someone had helped him dress in slightly better clothes, a clean white shirt and dark trousers, though they were clearly old and worn. The registrar looked at them with barely concealed pity and disdain. This was clearly not the kind of wedding he enjoyed officiating. The ceremony was brutally short. No guests except Adiz, Nkechi, and Mom Ngozi, who had arranged the marriage. No photographer to capture the moment. No joy, no music, no celebration. "Do you, Obi Namdi, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Obi said clearly, his voice steady. "Do you, Chioma Emeka Okonkwo, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Chioma's throat closed up. This was it, the moment that would seal her fate. She thought of her father's grave, her mother's smile, her torn admission letter, all her broken dreams. "I do," she whispered. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." No kiss, no applause, just the scratch of a pen as they signed the register, officially binding their lives together. As they left the registry, Adiz pulled Chioma aside. "You're his problem now," she hissed. "Don't come crying back to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. You made your bed, a beggar's mat, apparently. Now lie in it." Chioma watched her stepmother and stepsister walk away without a backward glance. Years of torment, years of cruelty, and this was how it ended, with casual dismissal. She turned to find Obi watching her with those intense, intelligent eyes. "Are you ready?" he asked gently. "Ready for what?" "To go home." "Home?" Chioma laughed bitterly. "To your mat under the tree?" Obi smiled, a small, mysterious smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Something like that." "Cool. A battered taxi pulled up, clearly arranged by Obi beforehand. The driver helped Obi into the back seat, folding the wheelchair and storing it in the trunk. Chioma climbed in beside him, her heart heavy with despair. The taxi began to drive, and Chioma watched the familiar streets of Surulere pass by. She expected them to stop near the junction, near the tree where Obi begged. Instead, the taxi kept driving. They left Surulere. They passed through Yaba. They entered Victoria Island. Chioma's confusion grew as the neighborhoods became progressively wealthier. The houses grew larger, the streets cleaner, the cars more expensive. "Where are we going?" she finally asked. Obi didn't answer directly. "Patience," he said. The taxi turned onto a tree-lined street where massive gates guarded palatial estates. Security guards in uniform stood at attention. Mercedes and Range Rovers gleamed in driveways. Then the taxi stopped before the largest gate Chioma had ever seen, tall, black, ornate, with golden accents that caught the afternoon sun. The security guard at the gate took one look at the taxi and immediately straightened. He spoke into a radio, and moments later, the massive gate swung open. The taxi drove through, and Chioma's mouth fell open. Before her stretched a mansion that looked like something from a dream or a movie. 3 stories of pristine white stone, with columns and balconies, surrounded by manicured lawns that looked like green velvet. A fountain in the circular driveway shot water high into the air, catching rainbows in its spray. Luxury cars, a Bentley, 2 Mercedes, a Range Rover, sat in neat lines. And, standing at the entrance, arranged in 2 perfect rows, were staff members. Maids in crisp uniforms, security men in suits, a butler in a white jacket. The taxi stopped at the base of wide marble steps. Chioma couldn't breathe. Her mind couldn't process what she was seeing. The driver opened the door and helped Obi into his wheelchair. As Obi was settled, one of the men in suits, clearly the head of security, approached and bowed respectfully. "Welcome home, sir." "Welcome home, madam." Chioma turned to Obi, her eyes huge with shock and confusion. What is this? What's happening?" Obi looked up at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled, truly smiled. It transformed his face, revealing a handsomeness that had been hidden beneath the dirt and exhaustion. "Welcome home, my wife," he said. "Welcome to your true life." Chioma stood frozen at the base of the marble steps, her worn second-hand wedding dress a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. Her mind struggled to reconcile the beggar she'd married with this palace, these servants, this impossible reality. "I don't understand," she whispered. Obi wheeled himself closer to her. "Come inside," he said gently. "Let me explain everything." The staff parted as Obi led the way up a ramp built alongside the marble steps. A ramp so elegant it was almost invisible, designed to look like part of the architecture. Chioma followed in a daze, barely aware of the enormous double doors opening before them. The interior took her breath away. The foyer alone was larger than her entire father's house. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls of light. A grand staircase curved upward, its banister polished mahogany. Original artwork hung on walls painted in subtle cream and gold. Fresh flowers, exotic blooms she couldn't even name, perfumed the air. "Sir, shall I have refreshments brought to the sitting room?" the butler asked. "Yes, thank you, Emeka," Obi replied, his voice carrying a natural authority that had been hidden when he sat at the junction. The sitting room was another revelation. Plush sofas in rich burgundy fabric, glass tables, a television screen the size of small wall, and more artwork. Through massive windows, Chioma could see the sprawling gardens, a swimming pool, and beyond that, a glimpse of the Lagos lagoon sparkling in the afternoon sun. A maid in a crisp blue uniform appeared with a silver tray bearing fresh juice in crystal glasses and a plate of small cakes that looked too beautiful to eat. "Please," Obi gestured to the sofa. "Sit." Chioma sat carefully, afraid she might break something. Her hands trembled as she accepted a glass of juice. Obi wheeled himself to face her. "My name is Obi Nambi. That much is true, but I'm not a beggar. I am the CEO of Nambi Logistics and Transportation, one of the largest shipping and haulage companies in West Africa." Chioma's glass nearly slipped from her fingers. "What?" 3 years ago, I was in a car accident," Obi continued, his expression growing serious. "A competitor, jealous business rival, arranged for my brakes to be tampered with. I lost control of my car and crashed. The accident damaged my spine. The doctor said I would never walk again." Chioma noticed the pain in his eyes, the old grief that came with that memory. "My fiancée at the time, a woman named Ifioma, who had been with me for 5 years, visited me once in the hospital. Once." His voice hardened. "She looked at me in the wheelchair and said, 'I cannot marry a cripple. My family would never accept this.' And she left." "That's cruel," Chioma breathed. "It was illuminating," Obi corrected. "After the accident, everyone's true nature was revealed. Ifioma wasn't the only one. Business partners suddenly became scarce. Friends stopped calling. Even some of my own relatives suggested I should step down from the company, that a disabled man couldn't run a business empire. He smiled bitterly. That's when I decided to conduct an experiment. I wanted to know if anyone in this world could see past the wheelchair, past the wealth, past the status. I wanted to find someone who would value me as a human being, not as a billionaire. Understanding began to dawn on Chioma's face. For the past 6 months, I have spent several hours each week sitting at that junction, dressed as a beggar. I wanted to experience what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be seen as worthless. And I wanted to see if anyone would show me kindness without expecting anything in return. The matchmaker, Chioma, started. Mama Ngozi works for me. Obi confirmed. I have a network of people across Lagos who help me identify situations. When I heard about your circumstances, a young woman being abused by her stepmother, forced into marriage, I saw an opportunity. Not to take advantage, but to offer escape. To both of us. Chioma's mind reeled. So this whole thing was planned? Not exactly, Obi said carefully. I didn't plan for you specifically. But when Mama Ngozi told me about your situation, about your dreams of becoming a lawyer, about how your stepmother was crushing your spirit, he paused. I wanted to help. And yes, I wanted to see if you would treat a disabled beggar with kindness or contempt. And did I? Chioma asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Obi's expression softened. Do you remember the first day Mama Ngozi brought you to see me? When you cried and said your life was over? Chioma nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. Most women would have looked at me with disgust. Obi said. They would have refused outright, no matter the consequences. But you, he smiled. You looked at me with compassion. You were terrified and heartbroken, but you didn't treat me as less than human. You spoke to me with respect. That's when I knew. Tears welled in Chioma's eyes. I thought I was being forced into the worst possible situation. And I'm sorry for that deception, Obi said sincerely. But I needed to know that whoever I married would value me beyond my wealth. Chioma loved my money, not me. I won't make that mistake again. Chioma set down her juice glass with trembling hands. What happens now? Now, Obi said, you have choices, real choices, not the impossible options your stepmother gave you. He wheeled closer. You can stay here as my wife. I will support your education. University of Lagos, law school, everything your father dreamed for you. You will have freedom, resources, and respect. Or, he paused, if you cannot bear to be married to a man in a wheelchair, if this is too much to accept, I will help you get an annulment. I'll set you up in your own apartment, pay for your education, and ask nothing in return. Chioma stared at him. You would do that? Just let me go. I will not trap you. Obi said firmly. I've experienced what it's like to be powerless, to have no control over your own life. I won't do that to anyone else, especially not the woman who is now legally my wife. The room fell silent except for the gentle tick of an ornate clock on the mantelpiece. Chioma looked around at the opulence, at the life being offered to her. Then she looked at Obi, really looked at him. She saw a man who had suffered and emerged with empathy instead of bitterness. A man who had wealth but valued character. A man who had been betrayed but still chose to trust. A man who, despite being in a wheelchair, sat before her with more dignity than anyone she'd ever met. My father used to tell me, Chioma said softly, that a person's true nature is revealed not when they have power, but when they have lost it. He said you can judge someone's heart by how they treat people who can do nothing for them in return. Obi listened intently. When I met you at the junction, Chioma continued, I thought you were just a beggar, but you spoke to me with wisdom. You treated me with respect. You promised you would never diminish me. She took a shaky breath. You were testing me to see if I was worthy of you. But you passed the test too. You show me who you really are. She stood up and walked over to his wheelchair, then knelt so they were eye to eye. I don't want an annulment. I want to stay. Not because of this house or your money. I didn't even know they existed when I married you. I want to stay because you gave me hope when I had none. Because you saw me as valuable when the whole world told me I was worthless. Tears slid down her cheeks. And maybe we can figure out this marriage together. Not as billionaire and beggar, not as savior and victim, but as two people who were both broken in different ways and might help each other heal. For a long moment, Obi simply looked at her. Then, slowly, he reached out and wiped the tears from her cheeks with gentle fingers. "My wife," he said softly. "I think we're going to be just fine." The first weeks of Chioma's new life felt like living in a dream from which she might wake at any moment. The mansion had 7 bedrooms, each larger than the entire floor space of her father's old house. The master suite, which she now shared with Obi, though they maintained separate sleeping areas out of mutual respect and the newness of their relationship, had a bathroom made of Italian marble with a bathtub so large it could be its own swimming pool. But it was the simple kindnesses that overwhelmed her most. The first morning, she woke in a massive bed with sheets so soft they felt like clouds. Sunlight streamed through gauze curtains. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was her mat on the floor? Where was the smell of dust and old fabric? Then memory returned, and with it disbelief. A soft knock on her door. "Madam," a gentle voice. "May I come in?" A young maid named Patience entered with a breakfast tray. Fresh fruit, soft bread, eggs, and tea served in delicate china. "Good morning, madam. I'm your personal assistant. Anything you need, you just call for me." Personal assistant. Chioma almost laughed at the absurdity. 3 weeks ago, she had been the one serving others, carrying heavy basins, hawking fabric in the merciless sun. Now someone was serving her? Thank you, she managed. But I can get my own breakfast." "Nonsense, madam." Patience smiled. "It's my pleasure. Besides, Olga said you were to rest today. Tomorrow we start your new wardrobe." "New wardrobe?" "Yes, ma. Olga has arranged for a fashion designer to come. He says you need proper clothes." Patience's eyes sparkled with excitement. The designer is one of the best in Lagos. True to his word, Obi had arranged everything. The next day, a woman named Mabel arrived, a celebrated fashion designer whose creations were worn by politicians' wives and Nollywood stars. She brought an entire team, armed with measuring tapes, fabric swatches, and a portfolio of stunning designs. "Mrs. Namdi," Mabel greeted Chioma warmly, as if they were old friends. "It's an honor to dress you. Mr. Obi told me about your previous circumstances. We're going to transform you into the queen you were always meant to be." For 3 hours, Chioma was measured, draped with fabrics, shown designs. Mabel explained each style with passion. Traditional Ankara dresses in vibrant patterns, elegant corporate wear for when she started university, evening gowns for formal events, casual outfits for daily wear. "For your first public appearance with Mr. Obi," Mabel said, "I'm thinking a traditional outfit. Something that honors your heritage but announces your new status. Rich purple with gold embroidery, perhaps? Purple is the color of royalty." Chioma touched the fabric samples, marveling at their softness. "It's too much." "It's exactly right," Obi said from the doorway, where he'd been quietly watching. "You deserve beauty, Chioma. You've lived in rags for too long." But the greatest gift came a week later. Obi invited her to his study, a magnificent room lined with books, with a massive desk of polished wood and windows overlooking the gardens. On the desk was an envelope. "Open it," he said simply. With trembling fingers, Chioma opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, official letterhead, University of Lagos logo at the top. It was a reinstatement of her admission. She was officially enrolled in the Faculty of Law, University of Lagos. Her father's dream for her, the dream that had been torn apart, was being restored. Chioma's hands shook so violently she almost dropped the letter. How did you—" "I have connections," Obi said with a small smile. "And money, apparently, can fix certain administrative issues. Your admission was never truly lost, just delayed. Now it's active. You start next semester." Chioma couldn't speak. She clutched the letter to her chest and wept. Great heaving sobs of relief, gratitude, and overwhelming emotion. Obi wheeled closer and took her hand. "Your stepmother tried to bury your dreams. But dreams don't die so easily. Not when they're meant to be." 3 months into their marriage, Chioma had transformed. The gaunt, defeated girl had been replaced by a confident young woman. Her skin glowed with health after months of proper nutrition. Her hair, professionally styled in elegant braids adorned with gold accessories, framed a face that had learned to smile again. She wore a custom-made Ankara dress in royal blue with gold embroidery, a masterpiece by Mabel that hugged her figure and announced her status without saying a word. But it wasn't just the exterior that had changed. Chioma walked differently now, head high, shoulders back, with the bearing of someone who knew her own worth. She had started university, and to her surprise, she loved it. The law classes challenged her mind in ways that felt like coming home. Her professors praised her sharp questions and thoughtful analysis. Other students, initially intimidated by her wealth, news of Obi Namdi's mystery wife had spread through campus gossip like wildfire, soon came to respect her for her intelligence and kindness. At home, her relationship with Obi had deepened into genuine partnership. They spent evenings in the study, Chioma working on case studies while Obi reviewed business reports. They shared meals, conversations about everything from philosophy to politics, and slowly, carefully, they were building something real. Obi had begun intensive physical therapy. While the doctors said he would never walk normally again, he had regained enough strength to use specialized braces and crutches for short distances. But he refused to be ashamed of his wheelchair. "This chair doesn't define me," he told Chioma. "It's just how I move through the world." One evening, Obi found Chioma on the balcony, staring out at the Lagos skyline as the sun set in brilliant oranges and purples. "You're thinking about her," he said quietly. Chioma didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes, Adiz, my stepmother. Do you want to see her?" Chioma turned to face him. "I want her to see me, to see what she tried to destroy but couldn't." "Is that wrong? Is that petty?" Obi smiled. "It's human, and I think you've earned the right to show her exactly how wrong she was about you." "Then yes," Chioma said, her voice steady. "I want to go back to Surrelir. I want her to see the beggar's wife she mocked. I want her to see the queen I've become." The next Saturday, a convoy of 3 vehicles rolled through the narrow streets of Surrelir, causing a sensation. The lead car was Obi's personal Mercedes-Benz S-Class, midnight black with tinted windows. Behind it followed 2 SUVs carrying security personnel. The cars moved slowly, commanding attention, impossible to ignore. Children ran alongside, shouting excitedly. Market women stopped their trading to stare. Men on street corners pointed and whispered. By the time the convoy reached Adiz's compound, half the neighborhood had gathered to watch. The Mercedes stopped in front of the familiar gate. The same gate Chioma had walked through 1,000 times carrying heavy basins. The same gate where she'd been verbally abused and humiliated. The driver, a professional in crisp uniform, stepped out and opened the back door with a slight bow. Chioma emerged first. Gasps rippled through the crowd. She wore an outfit that made her look like royalty, a flowing gown in deep purple silk with intricate gold embroidery at the neckline and sleeves. Around her neck hung a necklace of genuine gold and precious stones that caught the afternoon sun and sparkled like captured stars. Her hair was swept up in an elaborate style adorned with gold pins and small pearls. Designer sunglasses shielded her eyes, and her shoes, Italian leather, probably cost more than most people in the neighborhood earned in a year. She looked like she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. She looked untouchable. She looked like everything Adiz had tried to prevent her from becoming. The driver then moved to help Obi, lifting him gently into his wheelchair, but this wasn't the battered, rusty wheelchair from the junction. This was a state-of-the-art mobility device, sleek and modern, more like a piece of elegant technology than a medical device. Obi wore an impeccable white igbata embroidered with silver thread, and despite being seated, he radiated authority and power. The crowd whispered frantically, Is that Chioma? Chief Emeka's daughter. The one who married the beggar? That man is no beggar. Look at that car. That's Obi Namdi, the billionaire. Chai, the girl has been blessed. Inside the compound, Adiz heard the commotion and rushed out, Nkechi following closely behind. When Adiz saw the Mercedes, her eyes widened. When she saw Chioma step out, looking like a princess, her jaw literally dropped. When she saw Obi, whom she dismissed as a worthless, crippled beggar, and recognized the vehicles, the security team, the obvious wealth. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. Chioma. Adi's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Chioma removed her sunglasses slowly, deliberately, letting her stepmother see her face clearly. Good afternoon, Adiz. Not stepmother. Not even ma. Just Adiz. The disrespect was subtle, but unmistakable. Adiz seemed unable to form words. Her eyes darted between Chioma and Obi, between the luxury cars and the growing crowd of neighbors, between the impossible reality before her and the narrative she'd constructed in her mind. Nkechi, standing beside her mother, looked like she'd been slapped. Her mouth hung open unattractively. The designer clothes she wore, bought with money stolen from Chioma's father, suddenly looked cheap and tacky compared to Chioma's elegant outfit. You look surprised, Chioma said, her voice carrying across the compound with calm authority. Did you think the crippled beggar you forced me to marry was actually a beggar? The crowd leaned in, hungry for every word of this unfolding drama. I had no idea. Adiz stammered. If I had known he was a man of means, I would have. You would have what? Chioma interrupted, her voice sharp as a knife. Treated me better? Not torn up my admission letter? Not forced me to hawk in the sun? Not starved me and humiliated me daily? Obi wheeled forward, his presence commanding immediate attention. Mrs. Okonkwo, he addressed Adiz formally, his tone cold. When your matchmaker approached me about your stepdaughter, she told me everything. How you stole from your late husband's business. How you abused an orphan girl. How you forced her into marriage just to get rid of her. Adiz's face went pale. I married Chioma not because I needed a wife to care for me. Obi continued, his voice carrying authority that made even the onlookers stand straighter. I married her because I saw what you couldn't see. I saw intelligence, kindness, strength, and resilience. I saw a diamond that you were trying to bury in mud. He gestured to Chioma, who stood beside him radiating quiet confidence. Look at her now. This is who she always was. You were just too blind with jealousy to see it. The crowd murmured agreement. Some people nodded. Others openly glared at Adiz, who had always been arrogant and dismissive toward her neighbors. Adiz's face crumpled. She fell to her knees on the dusty ground, her expensive wrapper dragging in the dirt. Chioma, my daughter, please forgive me. I didn't know. If I had known, if you had known he was rich, you would have kept me prisoner in your house, Chioma finished coldly. You would have used me to get close to his money. The only reason you're on your knees now is because you made a mistake. You gambled that marrying me to a useless cripple would destroy me. You lost that gamble. Please. Adiz wailed, reaching for Chioma's dress. Take me with you. Take Nkechi. We can come and serve you. We can be your maids. Just don't leave us here in poverty. Chioma looked down at the woman who had tormented her for years. She felt no satisfaction in this moment, only a strange emptiness where anger used to be. Poverty, Chioma said quietly. You're not in poverty, Adiz. You have my father's house. You have his business, or what's left of it after you squandered most of it. You have more than most people in this neighborhood. What you don't have is my father's kindness, my mother's grace, or any shred of human decency. She bent down, so they were eye level. I will not take you to my home. I don't need maids who once treated me like trash. But I will do something you never did for me. Chioma pulled an envelope from her purse and dropped it at Adiz's feet. That contains the deed to this house, transferred back to you legally and permanently. My husband's lawyers have arranged it. Despite everything you did to me, I won't leave you homeless. My father would not have wanted that. Adiz snatched up the envelope with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. But hear me clearly, Chioma continued, her voice hard. If you ever speak ill of me again, if you try to claim any relationship to me or my husband, if you attempt to benefit from my success in any way, I will use every legal resource available to ensure you regret it. Stay in this house. Live your life. But stay far away from mine. She straightened up and took Obi's hand. We're done here. As they turned to leave, Nkechi suddenly found her voice. It's not fair, she shrieked. Why does she get everything? Why does the orphan get the billionaire while I get nothing? Chioma paused and looked back at her stepsister. Because, she said simply, when I met a man sitting at a junction, I treated him with kindness even though I thought he had nothing. You would have spit on him and laughed. That's the difference between us and Ketchy. Not luck. Character. The crowd erupted in agreement. People calling out true and well said, and that's right. As Chioma and Obi's convoy pulled away, the neighbors surrounded Adiz and Ketchy, their voices loud with condemnation. You see? Pride goes before a fall. You treated that girl like trash. Now look at her. Kai, God is not sleeping. Oh. Inside the Mercedes, Chioma was silent. Obi reached over and took her hand. How do you feel? He asked. Chioma considered the question. Empty, she finally said. I thought revenge would feel sweeter. But just feels sad. She wasted so much time on hatred and jealousy. And for what? She had everything and threw it away. That's the mark of true growth, Obi said softly. When revenge no longer tastes sweet. When you can give mercy even when justice would suffice. Your father will be proud of the woman you've become. Tears filled Chioma's eyes. Do you think he can see me? Wherever he is. I think he's been watching over you all along, Obi replied. And I think he led you to me because he knew I would see what he saw, a daughter worthy of every dream he had for her. 2 months later, the annual Lagos Business Summit took place at the Eco Hotels and Suites, the most prestigious business event in West Africa. CEOs, politicians, international investors, and media from across the continent gathered for 3 days of networking, deal-making, and showcasing success. This year, the event had extra buzz because Obi Namdi, the reclusive billionaire who had become even more mysterious after his accident, had announced he would attend. Moreover, he would be bringing his wife, whom he had married in a quiet, private ceremony that had escaped media attention until recently. The gossip blogs had been working overtime. Who is Mrs. Obi Namdi? Billionaire's mystery wife, from hawker to high society? Obi Namdi breaks silence. My wife saved me. Chioma was terrified. She stood in their bedroom, wearing the most stunning outfit Mabel had ever created, a floor-length gown in deep emerald green silk that seemed to shimmer with every movement. The bodice was adorned with hand-sewn crystals that caught the light like 1,000 tiny stars. The neckline was elegant but modest, the sleeves long and flowing. It was a gown worthy of a queen. Her hair had been styled by Lagos's most sought-after stylist, swept up in an elaborate updo with gold accessories woven through. Her makeup was flawless, subtle but dramatic, emphasizing her natural beauty rather than hiding it. Around her neck hung a necklace of genuine emeralds and diamonds that Obi had presented to her that morning. My grandmother's, he'd said. She wore it on her wedding day. Now it's yours. Despite all this magnificence, Chioma's hands trembled as she adjusted her jewelry. What if I say something wrong? She whispered to Patience, who was making final adjustments to the gown. What if I embarrass him? These are politicians, business people, educated elites. I'm just a girl who was selling fabrics in a market a few months ago. Madam, Patience said firmly, you are Mrs. Obi Namdi. You are a law student at the University of Lagos with top grades. You are intelligent, kind, and beautiful. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Obi wheeled into the room, and Chioma's breath caught. He wore a traditional agbada in rich navy blue with silver embroidery, tailored perfectly to accommodate his wheelchair. He looked powerful, commanding, every inch the billionaire CEO, but his eyes were only for her. Chioma, he breathed. You look terrified. She finished with a shaky laugh. I was going to say magnificent, he corrected with a gentle smile. He wheeled closer and took her hands. Listen to me. Every person in that room is just human. They put their trousers on one leg at a time, just like everyone else. Yes, they have money and power, but you have something more important. What's that? You have authenticity. You've lived through real struggle. You've known poverty and wealth, cruelty and kindness. You're not like the other society wives who've only ever known privilege. You have depth, perspective, and wisdom beyond your years. When you speak, people will listen because you'll be saying something worth hearing. Chioma took a deep breath, drawing strength from his words. What if someone asks about how we met? Tell them the truth, Obi said simply. I was testing the hearts of people by disguising myself as a beggar. You show me kindness when you thought I had nothing. That's a beautiful story, Chioma. There's no shame in it. But they'll know Adiz forced me to marry you. And they'll know that what was meant to destroy you actually saved you. That's the kind of story people need to hear. That God can turn poison into medicine, curse into blessing, ashes into beauty. Chioma nodded slowly, feeling her courage build. Okay, I'm ready. The Legos Business Summit Ballroom was a spectacle of opulence. Crystal chandeliers the size of cars hung from the ceiling. Round tables draped in white linen hosted 8 guests each, every table set with fine china and silverware that gleamed under the lights. A stage at the front featured a podium and screens displaying the summit logo. Men in tuxedos and women in couture gowns mingled, champagne glasses in hand, the air filled with multiple languages and the subtle scent of expensive perfumes. When Obi and Chioma arrived, a subtle shift rippled through the room. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Heads turned. Cameras, both official media and attendees' phones, swiveled in their direction. Obi wheeled into the room, with Chioma beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder in a gesture of unity and support. They made a striking pair, his power and her elegance complementing each other perfectly. A reporter rushed forward immediately, microphone extended. Mr. Namdi, can we have a moment? This is your first public appearance with your wife. Obi smiled graciously. Of course. This is my wife, Chioma Namdi. The reporter turned to Chioma, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Mrs. Namdi, there are rumors about how you and your husband met. Can you tell us the story? Chioma felt every eye in the room on her. Her pulse raced. But then she remembered Obi's words. Authenticity, not perfection. She smiled and spoke clearly, her voice steady. My husband wanted to know if anyone could see past wealth and status to the man beneath. So he disguised himself as a disabled beggar at a junction. When we met, I had nothing. I thought he had nothing. But we both had something more valuable, the ability to see each other's humanity. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, surprised, intrigued. So it's true, the reporter pressed. You married him thinking he was a beggar? I married a man who showed me respect when everyone else showed me cruelty, Chioma replied firmly. I married someone who saw my value when the world told me I was worthless. The fact that he's wealthy is wonderful, but it's not why I chose to stay. I chose to stay because of who he is. The crowd erupted in applause, genuine, warm, moved by her honesty. An older woman in an expensive lace wrapper approached, someone Chioma recognized from photos as Alhaja Bola Martins, one of Nigeria's most powerful businesswomen. My dear, Alhaja said warmly, that is the most refreshing thing I've heard at one of these events in years. Most of these society wives married for money and everyone knows it. But you married for character. That's rare. Throughout the evening, people approached their table. Some were curious, some were skeptical, but most were genuinely warm. Chioma fielded questions with growing confidence, telling their story honestly. Her father's death, her stepmother's cruelty, the forced marriage, and the unexpected blessing that followed. I was hawking fabrics just months ago, she told a group of ladies who asked about her transformation. But my husband saw potential in me that I couldn't see in myself. He gave me back my education, my dignity, and my dreams. I'm studying law now at the University of Lagos. Law, one woman exclaimed. Good for you. We need more lawyers from non-privileged backgrounds. You'll understand your client's struggles in a way many lawyers never could. At one point, Chioma found herself in conversation with the vice-chancellor of another university, discussing legal reform. She spoke passionately about access to justice for the poor, about how the legal system often failed those who couldn't afford representation. The vice-chancellor listened with interest, nodding thoughtfully. You have a sharp mind, young lady, he said. When you graduate, my university would be honored to offer you a scholarship for further studies. We need voices like yours in Nigerian law. Chioma's eyes filled with tears. Just months ago, she thought her education was over forever. Now a university vice-chancellor was offering her opportunities for the future. Across the room, Obi watched his wife with undisguised pride. She had been terrified just hours ago, but now she was holding her own among Nigeria's elite. Not by pretending to be someone she wasn't, but by being authentically herself. Later that evening, when they were finally alone in their car heading home, Chioma kicked off her elegant shoes and laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. "I did it," she exclaimed. "I actually did it. I didn't embarrass you." "Embarrass me?" Obi laughed. "Chioma, you were magnificent. Did you see how people responded to you? You weren't just another society wife. You were real. You were inspiring. That vice-chancellor offered me a scholarship," Chioma said, still amazed. "Because he recognized brilliance when he saw it," Obi replied. "The same brilliance your stepmother tried to suppress. The same brilliance your father saw in you from the beginning." Chioma leaned her head on Obi's shoulder, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible. For giving me wings when I thought I'd never fly again. For being exactly who you are." Obi kissed the top of her head gently. "My wife, my queen, my miracle. Thank you for choosing to stay. Thank you for seeing past the wheelchair to the man. Thank you for being brave enough to take a chance on something that looked impossible." As their car wound through the Lagos night, heading back to their mansion on Victoria Island, Chioma thought about how far she'd come. From hawking fabrics in the market to attending business summits with Nigeria's elite. From sleeping on a mat in a storage room to living in a palace. From being called worthless to being called magnificent. But the greatest transformation, she realized, wasn't external. The greatest change was internal. From a girl who believed she was nobody to a woman who knew her own worth. From someone who'd lost all hope to someone who dared to dream again. From a victim to a victor. And it had all begun with a choice she made at a junction. To treat a disabled stranger with kindness. Never knowing that simple act would change her entire life. The University of Lagos graduation ceremony was held at the massive outdoor quadrangle. Thousands of graduates in black gowns and caps filling the space. Families crowding the stands. Cameras flashing as futures took shape. Chioma Emeka Nnamdi, now 26 years old, stood with her graduating class, waiting for her name to be called. She wore her graduation gown over a beautiful Ankara dress in coral and gold, colors her mother had loved. Around her neck, beneath the gown, hung 2 necklaces, her grandmother's emeralds that Obi had given her, and a simple gold chain that had belonged to her mother. "Chioma Emeka Nnamdi," the announcer's voice boomed. "First-class honors, Bachelor of Laws. Recipient of the Chief Emeka Okonkwo Memorial Scholarship for Excellence." The scholarship had been established by Obi in her father's name, helping orphan students pursue education. Chioma was its first recipient, but over 5 years, it had helped 43 others. As Chioma walked across the stage to receive her degree, the applause was thunderous. She had become somewhat famous during her university years, not as the billionaire's wife, but as a brilliant student and passionate advocate. She had written articles about access to justice, volunteered at legal aid clinics in poor neighborhoods, and given talks about resilience and transformation. In the VIP section, Obi sat in his wheelchair, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, clapping until his hands hurt. Beside him sat Chioma's relatives, aunts and uncles who had disappeared during her hard times, but had cautiously reconnected after learning of her marriage and had been gradually welcomed back into her life, though with firm boundaries. Also in attendance was Mama Ngozi, the matchmaker who had first brought them together. She was now Obi's godmother to their 6-month-old son, Emeka, named after Chioma's father. The baby sat on Mama Ngozi's lap, his chubby hands reaching for her beads. After the ceremony, as Chioma posed for photos with her degree, a reporter approached. "Mrs. Nnamdi, how does it feel to finally achieve what seemed impossible 5 years ago?" Chioma smiled at the camera, then looked directly at Obi, who watched from his wheelchair with love shining in his eyes. 5 years ago, she said. "I was forced to marry a man I thought was a crippled beggar. I thought my life was over. But I learned something important. Sometimes what looks like the end is actually the beginning. Sometimes the worst moment is just before the best miracle. Sometimes God's plan is hidden in what looks like disaster." She walked over to Obi and took his hand. "This man saved me. Not with his money. I didn't even know he had any. He saved me by seeing me when I was invisible, by believing in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, by giving me back my dignity and my dreams." The reporter's camera captured the moment. A successful law graduate standing beside her husband, both of them looking at each other with love and respect, so genuine it was palpable. "What advice would you give to young women in difficult circumstances?" the reporter asked. Chioma thought for a moment. "I would tell them that your current circumstances are not your final destination. I would tell them that kindness is never wasted, the kindness you show others and the kindness you show yourself. I would tell them that true wealth isn't money. It's character, dignity, education, and love. And I would tell them that no matter how dark things look, dawn is coming." Later that evening, at their mansion, a small celebration was held. Nothing elaborate, just close friends, family, and the house staff who had become like family. As the sun set over Lagos, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Chioma stood on the balcony holding baby Emeka, who dozed against her shoulder. Obi wheeled out to join them, and they stood together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights begin to twinkle below. "Your father would be so proud," Obi said softly. "I think he's watching," Chioma replied, looking up at the darkening sky. "I think he's been watching all along. And I think he sent you to me. Or sent you to me," Obi countered with a smile. "I was the one sitting at that junction, looking for something real in a world of fake people. You were the answer to my search. We saved each other," Chioma said simply. Their son stirred in her arms, making small, sleeping sounds. This child, born from a marriage that had started with force and fear, was now surrounded by love, security, and hope. "What do you think Adiz is doing right now?" Obi asked, curious. Chioma had kept her promise. She had stayed away from her stepmother entirely. But through the neighborhood grapevine, she'd heard updates. Adiz still lived in the house Chioma had deeded to her, but her arrogance had been replaced by quiet humility. The neighbors no longer tolerated her rudeness, and Nkechi had married a man of modest means after several wealthy suitors rejected her for her entitled attitude. "I think she's learning the lessons she needed to learn," Chioma said. "I hope she's become a better person. I don't wish her harm, but I don't wish her back in my life either." "That's wisdom," Obi said. "Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it just means releasing the poison so it doesn't kill you." They stood together as night fell completely, the city spreading out before them like a carpet of lights. Millions of people with millions of stories, each one fighting battles and dreaming dreams. And in that mansion on Victoria Island, a once orphan girl who had hawked fabrics in the sun, who had been forced to marry a stranger she thought was a beggar, who had been told she was worthless and her dreams were impossible. That girl, now a woman, now a mother, now a lawyer, now a queen in her own right, stood with her husband and child and knew with absolute certainty. She had not just survived. She had thrived. She had not just escaped. She had transformed. And her story, which had seemed like a tragedy, had become a testimony.